The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I am Raygan Kelly, and I am joined this week by only one co-host, but, you know, he's a special one.
It's the brother, Shane Kelly.
That's right. I always feel a little bit like when we do episodes... by the way, listeners, Laura is sick, and Nate is in Budapest, a place that, for me, only exists as an exotic locale in, like, detective period pieces and things of that nature. It's a place where people are from.
I really enjoyed the Grand Budapest Hotel, so now I kind of want to go there.
I'm sure that it's just like the Wes Anderson version. You'll have to ask Nate all about it.
I haven't actually heard the story from Nate. Is he there for, like, business or pleasure?
Pretty sure it's business, but I don't know for sure. I didn't really talk to him much about his trip before he went. Hi, Nate. Hope you're having fun in Budapest. He'll probably be back by the time he hears this.
Have fun storming the castle.
Speaking of storming castles, we were taking this week to betray the very animating principle that drives the short game, completely destroy the podcast. We're talking about Baldur's Gate 3.
Yes.
A game that is 100% not short at all, bro.
Yeah, no, this is not a short game. Our listeners are unfortunately going to have to listen to us talk about probably the game of the year, the most talked about, most popular game on PC in the year 2023. So I'm sure they're all upset about that because the game's too long. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Listeners, we're talking about this because we can't stop playing it. And
I can't. It's fantastic.
It is. And also, it's completely wrecked the schedule for the show. Like, completely and utterly. There have been definitely a few nights where I was like, I should play this game for the show. I need to cover it. It's coming right up. Let's look at that clock. Got to play that short game for the show. And instead, I spend an equivalent amount of time playing Baldur's Gate 3. It's just been a thing. I've talked on the show before about, like, I have kind of a weird relationship to longer RPGs. I generally pick like one-ish a year and kind of play them in the nooks and crannies around the games that we play for the show, and usually in very small chunks. So, like, this is what happened to me with like The Witcher 3, which is one of my all-time favorites, the Persona games. I like RPGs. I like long RPGs. Most good RPGs end up being kind of long. But I just can't fit them in because of the way that we do the show. It's not really feasible. This one was like, screw your weird way of playing RPGs where you play them in 2-hour chunks over the course of, 7 to 12 months. And it just elbowed everything else out of the way. And I've put about 40 hours into this since it came out, which for me, I know, like, this is not a 40-hour game. This is like a 100+ hour game. And I'm not even past Act 1, which we'll talk about. Like, don't worry about spoilers, guys. We're really only going to be talking about Act 1 here, because that's really all we've been playing.
Act 1 so far, I got a lot of great things to say about it. I don't have a long history with computer RPGs. Raygan, you play a lot more RPGs than I do in general. I will pick one out maybe every few years. I think between the two of us, you tend to like games that are a lot more talky. I like games that are a lot more shooty. The thing that had me sold on Baldur's Gate 3, like, immediately, was that, I'm a big D&D fan, and I already, like, I have a little bit of experience because we did play the first Larian game a little bit together, but I didn't really make much headway into it.
Not the first Larian game, but we played Divinity: Original Sin, the first of those. Larian has been around longer than that, but
I didn't realize. What's their history before that?
Looks like I'm now, like, just looking up their Wikipedia. Founded in 1996 The Divinity Original Sin games are only the latest games in the Divinity series. The first one was called Divine Divinity, which came out in 2002, which I
what a title,
in some...
Divine Divinity.
I know, right? I love that. And its sequel, Beyond Divinity. I know almost nothing about those original Divinity games, but there's a bunch of them. There's Divinity 2, Ego Draconis, Divinity Dragon Commander, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they are... I was never interested in their games. I maybe kind of heard of them.
Though. I was.
No, I was never interested in their games until the Divinity Original Sin games, which I was very intrigued by because people talked about them in glowing, hushed tones. And specifically, they had people really talked up the... obviously, they're great computer RPGs, but they talked up the sort of emergent nature of the gameplay mechanics. Lots of stuff like being able to I don't know, light poisonous fog on fire to cause explosions, or exploit the battle system in weird ways to gain advantage before a battle begins, that kind of stuff. And I love that kind of thing. I love that. I don't play a lot of tactics games exactly, but I like the idea of being able to cleverly break a game in a way that both is and is not expected by the developer. I love that kind of stuff, these sort of systemsy stuff. And we played a good bit of Divinity Original Sin. I kind of liked it, but we never finished it.
The thing I liked about it a lot was kind of what you were talking about, the strategic gameplay, where you have a lot of different combinations of spells and elemental abilities and things in the environment. And I just thought it had really good combat encounter design, a lot of use of for this type of game, which my preconception about computer RPGs is it's just a flat isometric grid, and I'll move my characters around and until they're in range of each other, and then click to swing a sword. So Divinity kind of showed me, and the Divinity Original Sin showed me that there's a lot you can do with that in terms of just combining different abilities. And then of course this one, I've never had an easier onboarding to a complex game than I have with this one, because it is so good at adapting 5th edition D&D. The spells, the classes, the abilities are brought in to computer RPG better than I could have imagined they could be. This really, really, there are smart changes, but nothing that breaks the feel and what you as a player of tabletop D&D would intuitively think the way stuff is going to actually work. And I'm so impressed by that.
That is exactly what drew me into this, because like I said, I've been wanting for years to play Divinity Original Sin 2. It'd been on my backlog of and I really, really want to play this game.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh wait, if they're the developers behind this new Baldur's Gate, by the way, of course, this is handing the venerable Baldur's Gate series over to an entirely new developer for its 3rd entry, which I think is bold but awesome.
I have always heard about Baldur's Gate, but they're 20-year-old games, right? The last time I remembered hearing about them, lots of people were saying now's the best time to play Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate 2's out on iPad or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's not really a genre that's necessarily for me. Also, I know it's kind of an adaptation of the 3.5, I guess, rule set. And that would be, there was a lot of learning to do. You have to read a lot of those abilities and spells. I was able to start playing Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. This was so easy to get into as an existing Dungeons and Dragons player. So that's what I think is really brilliant. Dungeons and Dragons has had a really big moment in the culture. You can look at things like Stranger Things, obviously, but even broader,
the D&D movie was huge, very successful,
and Let's Plays of Dungeons and Dragons are huge. And so Dungeons and Dragons has been having just such a massive cultural moment. And so the number of people who have at the very least sort of read through the rules of Dungeons and Dragons has never been higher. And that, I think, has contributed to why this game has been such a massive breakout hit. I think if you threw average Joe gamer into, maybe Divinity Original Sin 2, super good game, very, very popular. It did really well, sold a lot of copies, but nothing like what Baldur's Gate 3 has done. And it's because you're throwing Joe average gamer into this complex computer RPG, but there's a better than average chance that he at least already kind of knows the rules, which was exactly what happened for you and me, Shane. Like I jumped into this and I immediately started swimming in a way that I've never done with a complex RPG with like complex battle mechanics before.
I think that's partially responsible for like the instant popularity, the surprise popularity of this. But, I think we can really point to the fact that we were already introduced to these characters in Commander Legends Battles for Baldur's Gate, a draft set for Magic the Gathering.
You dink.
It actually is very cool that, like, here I am sitting down and I know the names and faces of these characters even before I started playing, because hell, I was drafting this set back like more than a year ago. I think it was like 2022 or I don't remember when that set released, but it's been a while. And
not a factor for me.
No.
But
yeah,
cool.
but it is a really, this is a really well marketed game in that, and it's paying off for them really well. This is to me, this is when the big franchise thing works really well, right? Like D&D, like you said, is having a moment, but they're having a moment across all these different media. They've got the movie. I bought D&D toys recently for my son. They've got the card game, and now they have the computer RPG. And it's really satisfying that the computer RPG is as good as it is, because, I felt a little swept up in the hype. I'm like, hey, I'm into it. I'm here for it. Mm-hmm. But the gameplay, like, let's talk about the gameplay, because it is super good in my opinion. Like, yes. What do you think about, first off, the turn-based combat setup that they have? Apart from it just feeling good to a 5e player, what do you think about it in terms of on its own terms?
Well, there are just many, many things that make the turn-based combat feel fast and fluid to me. Like it's good about, just little stuff like automatically moving the camera to whoever's character is, needs to take an action, that kind of thing. Little stuff like, D&D can be a little complicated. Different classes have different approaches to how they take their turn. Things like, whether they have bonus actions. If you're, a barbarian, you have a different kind of set of potential options than if you're a fighter. Like, what is a superiority dice, like that kind of thing. Like these sorts of things can be kind of complicated, but it's done a really, really good job of presenting like what are your options for the character that you're looking at right now. Even with little stuff like bonus actions are represented by little glowing triangles, and if the triangle is glowing, you have a bonus action that you could use, that kind of thing. Little stuff like that like frankly made this way easier for me than certain aspects of D&D. When I played D&D,
you called out an issue right there, like the bonus action thing. To me, that's one of the most annoying elements of 5th edition D&D. Yes. And they did just port it right over here. It's downright silly that something that once you get to maybe level 3 or 5, you're probably going to have to be using every turn and trying to maximize your use of it and calling that a bonus action. It's basically, you might as well just have action A and action B.
Yeah, I get why, like, bonus action isn't the worst name for it, but yeah, no, I've had that problem with D&D 5e in that, like, I find some of the classes too confusing to play, and I've stuck with things like paladins and stuff because I like the martial classes. I like, swords and boards, but I also I like playing a character where, like, I attack this turn, like I like it simple. But this has let me, because you get this whole party and you're playing the entire party, well, unless you're playing multiplayer, which I'm sure we'll talk about the multiplayer mechanics in a little bit, but because you're playing the whole party, you get a little bit of flavor of multiple different classes, and it's so neat to be able to play like I never play warlocks. Like I've never played a wizard in D&D. I've just never done it because I like swords, dude. But like being able to try all of those and get a sense of how the characters work together, in a proper D&D campaign setting, that's you working with your friends. But there's still something really compelling about just sort of getting the feel for that interplay, just playing two characters, yourself.
Well, to expand it out from just the combat gameplay to all the gameplay, the game has a lot of dice rolling in a way that is that I like this kind of genre, like D&D running up against the computer RPG genre. Like there are some things that are really natural there that are absurd in D&D, and one of them is quick saves. But having that be a part of the way that it tells its story through its cutscenes and its dice rolls, I think that some people are going to really like that. Some people aren't, but I absolutely am loving it. My favorite thing about it is, and this is actually hard to do even in tabletop D&D, nearly every, well, actually I want to kind of compare it back to what I remember of Divinity, right? In Divinity, they had great combat encounters and they had an interesting story, but the individual combat encounters didn't always feel like they had their own story or that they were in furtherance of the main story. The way this kind of game works is you actually have a pretty limited number of enemies to fight. That's part of how they gate your progression. If you could just grind a limitless number of slimes and get to level 15 and then steamroll the game, I don't think that this game would feel the way it does, right? These games, I don't know how common this is in computer RPGs, but you really have to seek out the challenge in order to advance your character and get stronger. And I was enjoying that in the game that we played before Divinity, but this one does an incredible job of having each little encounter be telling you something about the world, be connecting to its own little story. And they're not just doing it through like you find a note on the ground, right? Even some of the ones that are just straight up random, like you run into some gnolls, right? And it's not really connected to a lot of stuff. I don't know if you encountered the gnolls.
Yes, great.
Okay.
I loved it.
But they use that as a chance to teach you what are gnolls, what is Inogu, the god they worship, like all this stuff, right? So they do, there's a rich bunch of lore that they can shovel in. I want to talk about some of the encounters that I thought have done this super well. We just played together.
And
the
again, listeners, we are now going to be talking about some story aspects from chapter 1 or act 1. It's a 3-act game, but act 1 is really meaty. Like I said, I'm at almost 40 hours and I'm kind of scraping the bottom of act 1, wanting to like do everything before I move on, but like talking about like longer than many whole RPGs is like act 1 of this game. It's quite meaty, depending on how much you like seek out. But yeah, if you are averse to spoilers or you are, planning on playing this game, I think we'll try to keep things a little bit sort of spoiler light. We're not going to like talk about like we're going to be talking about our experiences here. And it's going to be very hard to talk about them without talking about the story of act 1 or the things that are happening to you. So be prepared.
Absolutely. I was going to refer to the encounter around the character Auntie Ethel.
Yes. I
thought that had an extremely rich story with interesting moments that happened both in and out of the fight. I'm also thinking of the hidden room in the basement of the alchemist. That's not too much of a spoiler.
Yeah.
But there turn out to be really interesting things done in there that are happening story-wise, both in and out of combat. And in fact, they really blur the line there. One thing I absolutely love is like in any of these cutscenes, just about any of these cutscenes, there's a button at the bottom of the screen that you can click on that says like attack. Let's attack right this second, right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, you can do that and like fully change the outcome of the scene. There are characters that will die in cutscenes that you can save if you click that button, right? And I just think that level of depth is really ambitious for a game like this. Larian has done something really, really cool. I mean, this is a great example of like how you do story in combat right. I'm going to be thinking about this game for years when I am actually playing tabletop D&D.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and like we were talking about some of these encounters, like the anti-Ethel one is a perfect example. It's structured like a really good like 2-session D&D campaign, or not, campaign exactly, but like series of encounters. Like it's like this would be like one of those little paperback modules, right? And it's got multiple ways it can play out. An interesting like reason to be there, lots of really funny moments. This game actually has a lot of good humor in it. Like it's got some great characters, some good humor. We'll talk about some of the characters and what we like and don't about them, I suppose, in a minute maybe. But like some of the stuff that led up to the anti-Ethel fight was very funny, like really funny, really neat, like lead up the whole area around it. And the whole time I was thinking like, this is what I feel like when I'm getting a really good D&D session with a good DM, like you, Shane.
Thank you very much.
On your best days, it was a really good encounter, and it's just one small corner of this large map. The Goblin Camp, an excellent piece of design, like. The entire like process of like, choosing, going into the goblin camp, you have all this freedom. Like the goblins think that you're one of them. You can go and explore, you can see the whole place. And then you decide whether you want to go along with the plan for the goblins, whether you want to be sneaky, whether you want to like, there's multiple ways for you to just like rip off a seal and let something loose and go nuts in the goblin camp and have like absolutely insane combat encounters. Or you can play it sneaky. There's just so many options for how to approach these different scenes. And I've only played through this thing once. And, immediately every time I got through a big scene, I was like, that was super great. Absolutely satisfying. I loved the little story that played out for me there. But I'm dying to see how some of this stuff would go differently. In some cases, I've quick saved, gone back and tried little things that were different. But I mean, this is a game that more than any, 100+ hour game has made me like want to try a different approach to things. I was thinking a lot about The Witcher 3 when I played through this, because The Witcher 3 is a wonderful game. Like I really adored The Witcher 3. Like I said, like I played it like in little spurts for a year. It's one of the only games of its type that I played it on hard. By the way, if you ever decide to play The Witcher 3 and you haven't, I recommend playing it on hard. It's so much better on hard that I'm not usually that guy, but like, it's just one of those games, man, like really way more interesting and deep. But anyway, like a lot of the stuff, like the anti-Ethel bit, it's like a really good, one of the like really good Witcher 3 plot lines. Like it's a whole little plot line. And I thought a lot about The Witcher as I was playing through this. Like it's like on that level. And for me, that's like high praise, because that is maybe one of the most engrossing story games in the sort of RPG actiony kind of vibe that I've ever played. So this is immediately shot to the top of a lot of my lists.
I think it's also worth calling out while we're talking about what we love about the game. So it has what feel to me like tremendously high production values. This is absolutely one of the best voice acted games that I've played in a long time. There's a very charming cast of characters. We should talk through the different characters of the game in your party. And It's very well written from what I've seen so far. I'm told that the story, as it progresses through the acts, has you mentioned it has a lot of humor, but it seems to also have a lot of depth as you explore the story a little bit more. I hope we can get back together and maybe talk through some of that in another podcast.
Maybe when we get further through it, we'll do a little
when we finish it, right?
Patron special.
A couple years from now.
A couple years from now, for sure.
And it's also it has a really interestingly diverse cast of characters. Like there's a lot of different races and classes represented, and it has the characters that they put as kind of the face of the game. If you look at the main picture for the game, it has that kind of pile of characters' heads thing that is common on Hollywood movie posters, right? The biggest one, the one looking right out at you, is Asterion. Asterion is fantastic. I love Asterion. So I'll just take a minute and talk about one or two of my favorite characters. Asterion is a vampire, and he's not hiding it very well. And
not at all.
I think a little ways into his story, he takes you into his confidence and explains it to you, or tries to eat you. There's a few different ways they can go, I think.
Excuse me, he is not a vampire, by the way. He is a vampire spawn. I've always thought that the nature of vampires in the D&D world was a little weird. They're much more the mega monster, than vampires in most media. And vampire spawns are kind of powers wise equivalent to what you typically think of as a vampire, but they're actually more just thralls.
They're the Renfields to the actual vampires.
Yeah, but they're actually and in this he's a vampire spawn, so he's not one of the uber super powerful mega monsters like a true vampire is in D&D.
And he's also basically Tim Curry's Frankenfurter.
And maybe a little
extremely he sounds like him. He kind of looks like him with white hair.
He's the most queer coded character.
It's fantastic.
Why, when he starts hitting on, I was playing a female halfling, and when he started hitting on my female halfling, I was like, "Bro, are you sure you're on the right team here? Are you sure?"
He's so funny. And I mean, I'm playing a main character that is very stealthy, but I have a hard time not kind of rolling with two rogues because Asterion is so cool. My main character is actually a wizard, but I play him kind of like a rogue. So, and I guess my other favorite, I don't have her in my party all the time, but the character that I love to hate is Lae'zel.
I can't believe that they made me like this weirdo. The Githyanki are the dumbest shit in D&D.
If you don't know what they look up the original art for the Githyanki. It's the silliest thing, and they still look silly. They look like little spotty frogs, and they're and lore wise, they never really appealed to me that much either. They're kind of space elves, right? You got your D&D has expanded on Tolkien's high elves and wood elves with elves of every conceivable kind, right? And one of them is the Githyanki, who are the space elves.
I think calling them space elves is giving them entirely too much credit. They're gross. They're little alien dudes. Their defining feature physically is those tiny noses, which are really unpleasant.
Really funny.
Really I don't like them. And yet I freaking, and also they're the Githyanki are clannish weirdos obsessed with their queen, obsessed with honor. They ride dragons through space, which is pretty badass. But they're just this game starts with mind flayers and Githyanki in incredibly prominent positions. These are both things that frankly, I think if you're a DM and you're putting mind flayers or Githyanki in your session 1, you're a freaking weirdo. Those are the edgiest, weirdo stuff in the like main D&D stuff. Like I've never played a game where a Githyanki came up. It's just never happened.
They're pretty out there.
Yeah.
They're one of those things that like exists in D&D because they had to keep churning out content for Dragon Magazine for 15 years. Like that's and they're lore wise, they're actually kind of cool. You know, they've got a lot of story that's together with the Mind Flayers. Thanks to Stranger Things, the idea of a Mind Flayer is like in the cultural zeitgeist. So I think that's you know, even though the version of quote unquote the Mind Flayer that they showed in the Stranger Things, you know, nothing in Stranger Things really is like D&D. It's just the characters who like D&D.
Yeah, it's like a weird horror thing where the kids are applying D&D terms to the horrific things that they're encountering because it's the terms that they have for that stuff. Yeah.
So, you know, if you think that you're going to be up against like a weird puffy psychic dark cloud, like, you know, no, not really. You're actually up against Cthulhu tadpole monsters. They're basically what if Cthulhu rode in a cool spaceship and could turn you into one of those guys. Wanted to impregnate you with his tadpoles.
Really gross. And like overall, like I think that the inciting, you know, incident, like you got to come up with some reason to have like these weird 5 characters plus your, you know, your own headcanon rolled up your own weirdo character all get sort of forced together to, you know, adventure around very quickly. And so it's a reasonable premise, the idea that, you know, the game begins with you are abducted onto a Mind Flayer ship and they're about to turn you into a Mind Flayer. They've put one of these weird tadpoles in your brain, and then you guys escape altogether, and you've got to figure out how to get rid of these tadpoles in your brain on the quick before you all turn into slavering Mind Flayer weirdos. And that's a perfectly fine thing. It doesn't do much for me. It's like, if you know, Shane, if you told me that was the inciting incident for your next big D&D campaign, I'd be like, okay.
Well, I mean, I kind of did try and lean into that side of D&D in one of our campaigns, and I'll be honest, it was kind of a flop.
I don't remember what you're talking about. What do you mean?
I'm talking about when I had the Spelljammer inspired
the
space thing.
Guys. Yeah, that one okay.
So they're kind of part of that astral you know, spacey spaceship version of D&D, which, by the way, I mean, this is a complete side note, but one of the biggest disappointments for me in terms of actual 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons product has been the stuff that they put out for Spelljammer, because
is it no good?
I wanted it to have like rules for ship to ship combat that were any good. So far, D&D has taken like 2 or 3 stabs at doing ship to ship combat in different products, and they've all been kind of not fun.
Too bad.
And because it just, you know, a lot of them devolve into just like everybody does nothing. The one guy steers the ship and you shoot once, and then it's the next turn, the next round. Yeah. And all of that's cool and all, because you're in space. But like, I mean, it's a lot to get into. So it worked okay as like a high level jaunt through, you know, the planes or whatever, but I would never set a whole campaign in that campaign setting. So that's all I really, you know, while I'm talking about products from Wizards of the Coast, I will say that Commander Legends
Magic the Gathering
Battle for Baldur's Gate is actually a lot of fun to draft, and it's a commander draft. So if you have your D&D group and you're interested in trying it out, the box set for this is like $85 now. It's like kind of down from the original. They've printed the hell out of it, and it's I highly recommend it. They combine a lot of these same characters you'll see in Baldur's Gate. You know, you can get your Asterion the Decadent card, you know, for a white and a black mana for a legendary creature vampire elf rogue. with Death Touch and Lifelink, and he has 2 activated abilities. You can have your opponent lose life equal to the amount of life they lost this turn, or gain life equal to the amount of life you gained this turn. A perfect vampire.
Sorry, I dozed off there for a second.
There's also a lot of the characters, like Lae'zel, for example, use a mechanic called backgrounds, where you can have 2 commanders if one of them is this enchantment called a background, which is a nice way to kind of create a customized character, because these 2 things kind of go together. So I'm glad I got a chance to talk about that on our podcast, and no one, including the people on our Discord, are going to care. So
thank you, Shane. I wonder if we should talk a little bit about our own characters, like the process of creating a character in this. Because one of the things that I liked best about this was the character creator. You know, there's, for a certain type of D&D player, the most fun thing is creating your character, like coming up with a backstory and, you know, going through the player's handbook and everything. And this has a really excellent character creator that has a lot of the fun of coming up with your own tabletop character. It has an option at the very beginning of the game. You can choose between rolling up your own character or playing what it calls an origin character, which is basically you play as you take over one of the companion characters that you meet during the first act, and play them as your main character. And in the game's like menus, it doesn't really seem to weight you either way. But when I was preparing to play this, I had listened to an interview with one of the developers who more or less said like the intended first run experience is to roll up your own character, and then like recommended that for most new players. And so that's what I did. And I was very happy with that decision because I really like the character creator here. First of all, it has like, you know, as far as just like creating a character that looks like you want them to look, they have a ton of options here, but it wasn't so overwhelming. I run into a problem with like a lot of character creators where like I get something that I kind of like, and I'm like, well, what if it looked just a little better in X or Y ways? And then I go and touch like one slider, and suddenly I've created a hideous creature that I just detest, and I can never figure out how to fix it. And everything that I change trying to like make my character look the way that I want them to look just like looks worse and worse, until finally I say fuck it, and I play the whole game through as someone with like a flat forehead and a chin that sticks out farther than their nose or something like that. Right. I never had that problem with this. I am very happy with the character I created. And also, you know, D&D it gives you all of the options basically from the original 5e player's handbook. So you can be any of the classes. You can play, you know, a cleric and pick any of the gods that
you can multi-class.
Yes.
Between, as you know, the way that mostly works is whenever you level up, you're picking a level in a class, and multi-classing from 5th edition is very well supported here.
Yeah, I haven't actually explored much of that, but it's nice that
there's a really interesting blog post today from Larian, where they listed the top 20 multi-class combinations.
Oh, interesting.
And the way out in front, I bet you will never guess the combination that's the most popular.
I would not have. I saw that they put out a blog post a few weeks ago where they talked about like the stats on like main class, and surprisingly the paladin was way out in front.
Yes.
So
paladin is, but not
paladin rogue.
You were very close. It's actually ranger rogue is more popular. And I do think that's very interesting. I don't know. Maybe it's that, you know, your ranger is a long range specialist, and your rogue is kind of a up close backstab kind of character. Or, you know, sneak attacks are really cool when you can get them at range, right? So that's pretty cool. And then right beneath that one is barbarian fighter, which is a fantastic combination. You know, with fighter you get an extra attack early on. You have a lot of things like there's a lot of good stuff you can get in the subclasses too. And fighter is always and barbarian is super fun. But you mentioned Paladin being popular. The next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things on the list here are all some variation of multi-classing Paladin, either with Barbarian, Cleric, Fighter, Warlock, or Sorcerer here. So, yep, people do like the Paladin. I think the Paladin. I need to try a Paladin because I've not. They don't have any of the origin characters as Paladins.
No,
and if people are choosing it that much, it must be a really good class.
I always enjoyed playing I played a paladin for most of our time in D&D, and I really like it. I like the divine smites. I like the sort of mechanics around that. But also, there's just something satisfying about like imagining yourself as a knight in shining armor with a big ass sword and maybe a big shield. Like I like that vibe. I just like being the heavy, and I like the like, for the Lord kind of vibe too. I kick ass for the Lord. Like I love paladins. It's great.
Yeah. But yeah, your character, you built a very strange character.
Oh, not that strange. I just really liked the way that the small races looked in this. So I for my first character I rolled up, I built a halfling rogue named Pickles, and she's great. She's got little like top knot buns. I like the hairstyle options in this. And
pink hair.
Is it pink? I guess it's kind of pinkish, yeah. And I just think she's great and fun to play. And the game gives you lots of options. You get some options about your background. I chose that she like grew up as like a street kid in Baldur's Gate, so occasionally you get nice background like dialogue choices that give you like sort of remind you that she's streetwise about Baldur's Gate. Sometimes you get like nice rogue options. Being a rogue is fun because you can do things like pick locks pretty early, and that's fun. Disarm traps and all that stuff comes up. But I really enjoyed that character, and we'll talk about the multiplayer as well. One of the nice things about playing in multiplayer, if we both jumped into each other's games, and it gave me an opportunity to try something a little different. So I also rolled up a gnome a gnome ranger that I named Squeak, and she was fun to play as well. I enjoyed both of those. I thought about naming one of my characters Pasta because I usually, given the choice about naming a character, I usually name them Pasta these days. But in this case, I decided on something. I was like, well, I'll keep it a food theme with Pickles. But yeah, I don't know.
I tried to remake a NPC from an old campaign as my main character. And that's been a lot of fun. The NPC is a he's kind of a thief / wizard who is kind of inspired by the old stories Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and he is a honestly the way that I've built the character up to the level he's at right now, he hasn't multi-classed. I'm thinking about multi-classing, but just pure wizard. And there are a lot of really good spells for any play style in this. One of the things I really like about it is you're free anytime you're out of combat to switch your spells out as a wizard.
I like that a lot. That's one of my biggest pet peeves about the entire way that D&D has handled wizards since the beginning. The whole idea that only on a long rest where you can prepare spells, and you have such a small number of spell slots and spells as a wizard. It always felt a little bit like unwizardly. You know what I mean? Like no D&D character has ever felt to me like like a Gandalf or whatever. It always felt like a guy who knows how to do one weird party trick. And I never liked that about the sort of wizard.
Or, the most common variation is a guy who can cast fireball.
Right.
So far, I do not have fireball on my character. I'm not missing it. The most iconic D&D spell that I'm really leaning into is magic missile, which I've always liked. Love to be a spell sniper. The most fun thing I've found about the game so far is, because I'm kind of leaning into the kind of more roguish side of things, spells like Fog Cloud, Darkness, and Silence are really good to use in this game. And also like Minor Illusion is I'll throw on that list, because
you got to explain how you've been using Minor Illusion, because that one doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, Minor Illusion is a very silly spell in this. At first I thought, oh, this is kind of going to suck, because I love Minor Illusion in tabletop, because all it is you can create any image that you want that fits in like, I don't know, like a 5-foot square, right? And that's cool. There's lots of really tricky ways you can do that. Those are my favorite D&D spells, the ones that are really flexible. That one, Thaumaturgy, stuff like that have kind of an undefined effect that you can use creatively. In this game, you use it and it creates an illusion of a cat, and that is the only illusion you can create.
That's why I was like, what is this for?
Yes. Now I was kind of thinking I wanted to go illusionist in general. So I got that spell for free, and you get an improved version of it that you can cast as a bonus action, which is very helpful. But what that spell does is this illusion of a cat, every creature that can look at it is going to look at it. And because it sits there and it like meows once, and it's kind of it's like a glittery cat just appeared. Adorable. It's cool. And then everyone that looks at it has to make an investigation check to see if they see through the illusion or not, right? And most of your like not too smart enemies are not going to make the right check, right? So they are going to see, and in a lot of cases, like target the cat. And like, especially against like beasts or, the dumber enemies like goblins, like, you can use this in stealth when you want the guard to look the other way. You can use this in combat to distract an enemy and get them to like skip an attack for a turn. So it turns out to be actually very, very useful, when at first I thought like, what the hell, cats only version of the spell, come on. But this game is, I will say, full of really lovely cats. I don't know if you met Gale's familiar.
Not yet, no.
Okay, I think you meet, I forget the name. Not really a cat. It's what's called a tressum in D&D lore, which is a cat with wings. Adorable. And I think you meet in the Blighted Village, but I might be wrong. Up on a roof. Speaking of animals, talking with animals is delightful in this game. Speak with Animals has always been another great spell with a kind of undefined element to it. This game really leans into that. There's a lot of animals, and all of them have great dialogue.
I love it. It's one of my favorite things about this game. It's so strange that like you can just go randomly talk to every cow or rat that you happen to see skittering around.
Yeah, but and only if you took this one weird spell that probably half of people are not going to take.
Yeah, I don't actually have a reliable source for Talk with Animals, so I've had a few scrolls for it and stuff, and I've used it in a few clutch situations. But it's one of the biggest regrets is like I should have like leaned into Talk with Animals earlier. Mm-hmm. Now that I know how cool and funny it is, I'm like trying to like figure out how to get it on one of my mains. But yeah, it's really impressive that they put so much like every spell that you include in a game like this. If it's not like a super specific, like, create fireball type of spell, like then almost every spell can be cast in and out of combat, and some are only out of combat. And things like speak with the dead or speak with animals, like
so
the amount of
I'll have to tell you offline. I'll have to tell you offline because it's a big spoiler, but I just got access to speak with the dead as a really good reward for a very fun quest, and that spell is also done really well.
Like, yeah, exactly. I've got that on main, and like it's really, really useful because you're constantly finding corpses, and you're like, where did this person hide their big stash of gold or something? Let's ask them. But they've done some clever stuff with it too. Like if you killed a guy, then you go talk to him speak with talk with the dead or whatever, and he's gonna know it was you, and he's gonna, I don't want to talk to you. You killed me, you bastard, and then he's gone. But if you you could use disguise self first and then talk to him, and they're like, that asshole killed me, and you're like, who? I don't know who that was. Well, I love it. I love that. It's so great.
Yeah, they really. It feels like they grabbed a lot of the spell book for 5th edition D&D is full of these like spells that you would not think would work very well in a video game, and they've done
because they take an enormous amount of effort to implement, because they are something that like this means you literally have to write a dialogue tree for every fucking rat. Like, it's insane.
For every corpse that's left laying around.
Every corpse. This is a game with a lot of corpses.
And more once you get through with it.
Right.
And
love it.
Yeah. So all of that has been truly fantastic. How's the game actually been playing for you on a technical level? Like I tried running this on my Steam Deck, and it actually ran. I was surprised pretty well. It didn't look very good.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to play it on my PC, and that's where I've been playing it.
Same. Technically, I think it's a great technical game if you have the hardware to play it. I think this is one where, like, if you have a PS5, that version seems to be good. I've been playing it on PC, and
it was
I'm
delayed on the Xbox, right? Because
it's still not out on Xbox.
So I think it is now, right?
No, it's still not out. They had an issue with Xbox where Xbox has a policy where this game can be played in multiplayer.
It has to be the game has to be released with all the same features that it has on other platforms, right?
No, it's between the Series X and the Series S. So the Series S is very underpowered, right? I have one, it's fine, but like I play like indie games on it, so it doesn't matter. But like the rules with Xbox
are do everything the same on both of those.
Yeah, and they couldn't make the split screen work on Xbox Series S because you're essentially kind of running the game twice. Like it just doesn't work. And so
please don't give developers more reasons to not include couch co-op.
I know. They apparently have now gotten a dispensation from the Xbox Pope where they're going to be allowed to ship a version where it's it has where it doesn't have the same features between those two platforms, but that's like a policy, like a platform policy. So they skipped Xbox and kind of gave PlayStation an accidental exclusive on this hottest game of the year. And I'm sure that that
probably sold
Phil
a few
Spencer
PlayStation
or whoever
4s,
are shooting themselves about it. But it's probably sold some PS5s. If you can, I think the place to play this is on PC. I have a 3070, which is it's a few years old. It's from 2020, but it's like a good graphics card, like a good mid-range graphics card. And I've been very happy with the experience here. I also played a good bit of this on Steam Deck, and same thing as Shane. Like, this game has surprisingly good.
I did notice controls. You also cannot do the split screen on Steam Deck because I was hoping I could do that as a way to get it into the living room.
You can do some console hacking or something to allow it. But I don't know what the performance is going to be like. What I've found out myself doing is streaming the game from my PC to the Steam Deck, which has worked out great. Or actually more often from the gaming PC to a laptop, because for me, this game just plays way, way better with a mouse and keyboard. With a game where you're selecting a character, selecting a spell to cast, having a hotbar with all of my actions laid out and visible. For me, in this game, is easier to grok than multiple levels of wheels, on-screen wheel menus. It's a good system that they've created. If you prefer playing this kind of game on a gamepad, you'll have a good time. But I think if you can, this is something to play with a mouse and keyboard. I found it's a way better experience for me.
It's probably also worth mentioning, this game is 120 gigabytes. It's gigantic.
Oh yeah.
And so if you have that kind of storage space on your console, good luck to you. Also, I would never try to play this game off of a hard drive. You're going to be quick saving and quick loading so much, and off of an SSD, it's already a little bit pokey in some cases. So
yeah, this is the game that made me upgrade the SSD on my Steam Deck, and I was glad I did it. It's been very convenient to have a much larger SSD on that thing, but like, it 128 gigabytes on what was previously a 256 gigabyte Steam Deck. I was like, oh,
yeah, I had to delete a lot off of my Steam Deck to install this, and all that just to basically not play it on the Steam Deck. I'm kind of,
Another thing we haven't talked about yet is the multiplayer experience, which has been really interesting because it's improved. We had some weird, funny. It's a weird setup.
Okay. Yes, it is.
First, let's talk about what it actually is now, because like for people who are checking out the game, some of the weirdness that we encountered
can load into your game, and when your buddy loads into your game, the first thing they'll do is create a character, and they can do the character creator, and then they'll level that character up to the level of your party. And then if you want, you can actually,
which I really appreciated. Like, I really hate that experience of like, oh yeah, let's play this game together. We're both interested in it, but like, I picked up the game 6 minutes later than you did, and that means that we're fighting characters that'll one-shot me in the eye, and that so I'm just like I hate that experience. We've played like we were talking about playing what was it, Borderlands, which we played a good amount of together co-op at various times. But that had that problem where like if we weren't carefully orchestrating who we were, when we were playing and whether we were playing together and like keeping on the same level as each other, like it immediately quit being fun because it was, you were loading in with your existing character who might be wildly underleveled for something that your friend was doing, or if your friend loads into your game, like they might be just curb stomping what would ordinarily be interesting bosses for you. I hate that experience. I've never liked that kind of approach. So I really like that for this, although it is a little annoying that I can't like bring my fun character I've already been playing as into your game. I liked that I was able to roll up a character and they instantly leveled up to match your level. And D&D makes that kind of easy because like we're not talking about like tons and tons of little micro levels like you have in a lot of games. Like going from like level 3 to level 4 is like a massive shift in this game. You level up relatively infrequently. By the end of Act 1, I'm at level 4.
Kind of worth mentioning, this game really only has 12 levels. Like that's the level cap. D&D, of course, goes up to 20th level. If your campaign survives that long, which it probably will.
None do.
But yeah, so the multiplayer experience is pretty smooth. You jump in. You can choose how to divide up the party between the two. They do some smart things where in initiative order, in turn-based combat, it can allow both characters to kind of do their thing simultaneously a little bit. You do, like I think, find yourself waiting on your on your co-op partner quite a bit in this game due to the turn-based nature of combat. I don't see how you avoid that. I think they've done their best with some of the simultaneity. If both people are super fast clickers who know exactly what they want to do and need no discussion about objectives, great. But it's I think that the turn-based combat works pretty well in a multiplayer context. What was really funny was the way it worked originally, and because Raygan joined my game and then left. We had a good time in that first play session, and then I realized I couldn't figure out how to get his character to stop following me around. His little mute, like player character, but not right. I had to eventually quit the game and Google it, and it turned out that you cannot kick the guy out. You if you ever play multiplayer with anyone, you were permanently stuck with their character mutely following you around, taking up a party slot.
And there are only 4 spots in your
There's only four slots, and every character is more interesting because they have voice lines. So
I read some horror stories of people like accidentally opening up their game on multiplayer, ending up with like 4 randos with names like Sir Megapenis or whatever. And then and then they just like were stuck
You
with
can't
that.
delete Sir Mega Penis. That was clearly not the best. And so thankfully, they very quickly released what I thought was a very funny way to address that feature. They added a wardrobe to. They already have this character that's a some sort of lich or zombie called Withers.
Very weird.
Who I would like to nominate for Galerius award, because
maybe
the true nature of a Galerius is it's an NPC in your game that serves that has its place in the story, but truly exists to make gameplay easier and to help you get things done. And that is what Withers is to a T. Withers is an easy way to respec your character and revive dead party members. Well, now he has a box for you to put with your wayward friends in, and you can put them into this box and take them out of the box. I don't know if I don't know if you have seen this, but when you leave the game now, if I go and try to talk to your character, they're just sitting. It has a cutscene where they're like sitting there glassy eyed and
oh no,
and it's like your ally seems to be not quite themselves, or some of the narrator comments on it or something. Then you can like pick them up and put them into a creepy wardrobe, which is
that is so
an
funny.
interesting way to address the issue. I'm glad it's but this is all features of something I really like about the game that was also not present in some of the previous games, which is camp. At any time you can teleport out of the bottom of a dungeon or whatever to camp, which is a campsite. And there's lots of different ones themed on the environment that you're in. So the illusion is like you have a camp nearby, right? But you're really just sort of teleporting to camp. And at camp, you've got all your stuff, all your companions. Withers is there. The wardrobe is there.
You can take a long rest there.
You can take a long rest there. And crucially, lots of inter-party cutscenes take place at camp, and going and taking a long rest is a very frequent trigger for advancing the individual
for the characters
story
to
quests.
Fuck.
I among many other fuck or kill each other, or lots of other things that can take place. So
a lot of hay has been made over the fact that this is a relatively horny game. I actually have to say, the game is what you make it. I haven't found it to be like excessively horny, but you are rolling around with like bisexual vampire of the year and like other, and Shadowheart is a little overeager. Like there's definitely like, if you lean into it, if you enjoyed like the romance in something like Dragon Age, right? Then that is here for you. And I'm into it. Like I like, I want my little rogue to get it on with the vampire. Like, sure, totally into it. Want to see it in detail, close-ups, please. But like, it is sort of just like, it's just there as an option. Like, you don't have to lean into that. It's all very like, multiple layers of very well-meaning consent happens before you find yourself in any of these sorts of situations. I enjoyed it. I think it's fun. So yeah.
I mean, if you want my take on the romance, it's good romance. I'm not like leaning heavily into it. I think that people that played the game early on, as I've read in some of the patch notes, I think they had a very interesting experience, because according to the patch notes from Larian, one of the first things they did was to kind of slow down the character's speed at which they will leap into bed with the player character. The some of the characters were getting kind of possibly an undeserved reputation for being super horny in the online discussion. It's more like this is a game that like kind of has that, if you're going to camp every 15 minutes and doing every dialogue tree, you're certainly going to run into it.
Yeah. I
really
also do like, though, that all the characters, all the side characters, have their own little quest line that you can advance and build your relationship with them. I love nothing. I'm a Persona guy. Like I love nothing better than doing quests for someone so they like me more. Like I love that stuff. You know, give me the side character quest line that lets me advance my relationship with them, and you know that's here, and that's part of the romance stuff. But yeah, that's not
reminded
a
me
large part
of what I like about the Dragon Age games. You know, I think those games do this kind of thing pretty well. This game certainly does as well, and they really make all the characters very likable, with a couple of exceptions for me. But I think tastes vary.
Yeah.
I've already talked about some of my favorites. I do want to mention Karlach just as being absolutely downright lovable. And now that I've kind of met all the characters, I'm ready to fully advance the story and get into what's happening in Act 3. So, Act 2. Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
I can't wait to play more. But we have to play other stuff for the show too. So we'll be doing more of that soon. Listeners, the show is going to get very interesting for the next few weeks because we're rolling into October. And as you may remember, if you've been listening to the show for a while, October is the beginning of IF Comp. And last year, our IF Comp coverage was a little thin on the ground because I had just had a baby. My baby turned 1 a couple of days ago, and yesterday. And so what is time? And so, you know, things are a little different for me now than they were like a year ago exactly. So things, I'm looking forward to IF Comp this year. We're going to try to spin up our coverage and do our typical thing. And we've got some other games that are sort of on the burners as well. So I'm looking forward to this month and into November. This is going to be a good fall for the show. Listeners, if you have suggestions about games for the show, if you have thoughts about Baldur's Gate, if you have thoughts about actual short games that are actually on topic for the show, you can join us on our Discord. Head to theshortgame.net, or excuse me, our new and improved website, shortgame.fm. Head to shortgame.fm, where you'll find all of the links and buttons. There's a link there to our Patreon. All of our patrons get access to our Discord community. Great way to come chat with us about the show. We would love to have you. Or you'll find links to our various socials and the socials of our various hosts. You can find me on there, or link to my Mastodon, which is the main place that I post these days. If you have, and there's a contact form and email there. If you have other suggestions and you aren't on our Discord, or you'd prefer to send us a screed, we're happy to receive those as well. Also, don't forget to leave a review for the show on your podcast platform of choice. Apple is obviously the big one, but most of them now include a facility for you to rate or review shows. That is a big part of how people find the show. We consistently hear from our listeners that the way they found the show was, I really liked Game X, and so I went to podcast platform and typed in Game X in the search, and yours was one of the shows, found you that way. And so that's really important, but the ranking for who
episodes like this are not great for that strategy. I don't think we're going to come up high on the list of podcasts.
No, not considering that we're doing it like a couple of months late, and also we're talking about a game that literally everyone's been talking about. But listeners, we really do appreciate the help. A rating, a review, it doesn't just generally bubble us up. It helps in those scenarios. It's a thing that's really important to us, being able to be findable. So if you have a moment and you want to leave us a review or a rating or both, please do. It means a lot to us. And of course, the Patreon, if you're a patron, we appreciate your support enormously. Thank you so much for what you do. Let's see. You can find me on the web at Raygan.me, and it's got links to all my socials and everything. Shane, where can people find you?
You can find me on Mastodon at Shane@bird.rodeo, or you can find me on Threads at 8bitshane.
And listeners, thanks once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. Or rather, the extremely long game that I don't know why we talked about it on this particular program, apart from that we're enjoying it game.
We talked about it, and listeners, sidebar, this is some behind the scenes podcasting talk. We are when I want to play a long game, if I can't talk about it on the show, then I can't play as much of it as I would like, because I have to play something else. So, I am going to take, if we get no complaints about this, I am going to take that as audience consent to continue to discuss slightly longer games or chunks of long games. And I am going to keep doing it until someone tells me I'm ruining the short game.
The podcast. How dare you?
How dare I ruin this thing? I don't think it's ruining the podcast, but I do feel like I'm cheating somehow.
I kind of do too. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.
Like if it was a long game and we didn't like it, obviously we're not going to do an episode on it. But if we really like it, maybe we can just keep doing episodes on it. I don't know.
We'll see you next week on another episode of the Baldur's Gate 3 cast.
Raygan, I have a podcast that I've listened to for a long time that's about Magic format called Cube, right? And the podcast was made and themed around this obscure specific way of playing Magic. At a certain point, the two guys that did it really just decided they wanted to get into Warhammer 40K, and the podcast just became a Warhammer 40K podcast. And I was like, I didn't know you could do that. You can just change your podcast. You can just podcast about something that's not on your iTunes art.
You can podcast about something different than you've been podcasting about for 9 years. How dare you? Well, anyway, listeners, have no fear. We're really continuing to cover short games.
You're going to get, if they stop making really good short games, you're in for it, listeners.
Oh God, we're all screwed. Thank you. I've tried to end this podcast 100 times now, but this is it. Thank you for listening to The Short Game. Goodbye.